Well, a very good afternoon to you and welcome along to this Advantage Business Travel webinar today. My name is Steve Dunn of Digital Drums, and it's my great pleasure to be the moderator for today's session, which is entitled The TMC Business Model for a New Age. Now, Advantage Travel Partnership is, of course, the UK's largest independent travel management and TMC partnership, with around 200 TMCs servicing corporate clients, predominantly within the SME market. Members are each independently owned, but as a collective, they produce over £4.5 billion worth of business travel sales each year. Now, Advantage is also the majority shareholder in the Win Global Travel Network, another network of corporate travel experts, but this time on an international scale. And I know we have some of their members viewing us today and this webinar, so welcome to you as well. For an idea of the scale of Win, it has an annual collective spend of around about 15 billion US dollars and is present in more than 75 countries. Now, we want today's session to be as interactive as possible. So do please get involved and ask our panel members questions and give us your views on what you're going to be hearing about today. Now, you can do this by using the question icon, which is at the bottom of your screen there. I will then be able to pose that question to our panel. So please do ask as many questions as you wish about our webinar today and the subject matter. Now, I will, wherever I can, obviously try and credit you with the question, unless, of course, you don't wish to be credited with it. But sometimes on these kind of Zoom style virtual conferences, we get, because people can't see each other in the room, we tend to get maybe the same question being asked several different times, maybe slightly differently nuanced as it goes along. So if that is the case, what I tend to do is try and group them together and ask it in one go, just to save time more than anything else. We also have a hashtag for you social media types. It's hashtag, I'm going to spell this out because it's not the easiest thing to trip off the tongue. It's hashtag ADV TMC Talks, ADV TMC Talks, Advantage TMC Talks, ADV TMC Talks, and we'd love to see you maybe tweeting or on LinkedIn talking about this particular webinar today. Now, we also have, just to get the whole circle completed in terms of engagement, we've got a poll. And we'd be really grateful if you would take part in it. Essentially, it's just one question with three answers, a yes, a maybe, and a no. And it asks you if you are considering or would consider a subscription-based fee model for your TMC. And it applies to TMCs or corporate buyers. And again, I know we have quite a few representatives of both those camps as well on our call today. Now, it's very clear to all that, actually, if we could just see that now, you can hopefully see it right on your screen, as you can see. So if you start filling that out, that would be terrific. So we'll take a couple of readings of that as we go along through the session. So we'll get a little poll going to see whether you're in favor, thinking about it, or dead against the subscription model as we start to get it explained to us and debated here on the webinar today. Now, as I was saying, it's very clear to all that TMCs have been providing critical support to their clients throughout the current COVID-19 pandemic, while at the same time having their revenue under pretty much an intense day-to-day pressure. For many TMCs who have favoured a transaction-based model for their business, the no transaction, no fee scenario has created a real and intense business challenge for them. Now, for the SME market, it's been long argued that the management fee model isn't suitable for all, and the pandemic itself has caused some TMCs to reconsider their pricing model. But on a closer inspection, and when I was doing some research for this webinar, I found out that the TMC pricing model has been a moot point for quite a long while, even before the pandemic came along. In a recent survey by the ITM, some 60% of travel buyers who were surveyed revealed that they would be open to reviewing the pricing structure of their TMC deal. So, given all that, it's no wonder there's been some widespread talk in the sector of new pricing structures. And the phrase that is increasingly being used is the subscription model, which many are asking will it be the new model for charging in the new age of living alongside COVID? So, we have to ask the questions. What is it all about? What is the subscription model? And how does it differ from a management fee? Is it what the corporate buyer really wants? How do you manage it into your business? What technology is required? And what are the challenges? And maybe even what are the downsides of it as a pricing model? Well, to help us get through this web and discuss this new hybrid model, and to discuss the pros and the cons of it and how it works for a TMC and indeed for a corporate buyer, we're joined, I'm delighted to say, by 4 panel members who cover most of the key components of this new model. Firstly, we're joined by Bex Dedman. She's Managing Director of Blue Cube Travel, who, it's been reported in the business travel media recently, has made the leap to charging a subscription for its services. And it's claimed that Blue Cube Travel is one of the first traditional TMCs to break new ground with this latest adaptation. Bex has been in the business travel sector for over 20 years. She joined Blue Cube Travel in 2013, initially as Director of Sales, rising up to Commercial Director 2 years later, and in 2019 was promoted to Managing Director. Now, her role, amongst many, many other things, is to focus on the strategic direction and the future proofing of Blue Cube's entire business. So her insight into this new model will be absolutely crucial. We're also joined from the United States, I'm delighted to say, by Matt Griffin, who's Chief Product Officer for Traxo, which provides itinerary, intelligence, and travel data aggregation to their clients across the sector with its data aggregation platform. Now, as Chief Product Officer at Traxo, Matt guides the evolution of Traxo's products based on the company's mission, which is to organize and unlock all corporate travel data to empower travel managers and turn every corporate travel program into a strategic asset. And we'll be looking forward to hearing Matt's take on this new model as well. Our third panel member is, I'm delighted to say, David Chappell. David is UK Country Director for Midoko, a market-leading mid-office software company, which he joined only last month, I believe. David is a former Director of Technology at Fellow Travel, and prior to that was Head of Technology at the TMC Grey Doors. Finally, it would be remiss of us when talking new charging models not to ask the corporate travel buyer themselves. And I'm delighted to say that we're joined on the panel by Simon Potter, who is Group Procurement Officer at Inchcape Shipping Services. Now, Simon has more than 20 years experience in the procurement industry and specializes in maritime and shipping. He has had senior roles with AP Moller, Maersk, DFDS, P&O Ferries, and his current position with Inchcape Shipping Services is with the world's largest port agency, which is part of the Dubai World Group of companies. Simon is responsible for the global procurement, quality, safety, and environmental strategies at Inchcape, whose offices incidentally span more than 70 countries. A very warm welcome to all of you, and thank you for joining us here today. And my very first question is to you, Bex, which is, you're the groundbreaker, according to the media, what is a subscription model? If you could talk us through what it is and why you've adopted it specifically for your business.
Of course, no, I'd be delighted. So for me, we've been asked this question a lot, and for me, the subscription fee model is an evolution of where we've come from transaction fees and management fees to the next piece. But the easiest way to describe it is a fee which allows a user to subscribe to multiple services within that. So rather than the traditional transaction fee model, which is normally paid for when you're actually booking a flight or a hotel, you instead pay a monthly or a quarterly or an annual fee, perhaps based on users, perhaps based on modules, perhaps based on services, depending on what that client wants, and you charge accordingly for that. So the idea of a subscription fee is it's tech. I mean, there's tech TMCs that have been working with this, so I'm not going to claim completely on that. But I would say, regarding with a traditional travel management company, our services have changed a lot over the last few years, and a subscription fee model really, for me, describes those services much better than just the transaction.
So how does that differ from what we would know as both the pay-as-you-go, the transaction-based one, but also the management fee? How do they absolutely separate if you were to define
I
it?
think when you said earlier at the beginning, I think the management fee has always been a bane of contention for SMEs. When you're dealing with really, really large global spends that our big corporate friends are doing, a management fee is a different kind of approach, because you're saying, look, I'm going to take your entire spend and I'm going to say that 10% of that is going to be the management fee, and that's what it's going to cost to manage that. But when you're working in an SME world, it doesn't really work like that. And bearing in mind that a lot of them can now book travel, everybody can obviously book travel by themselves. They just want to see the value, and it's not always easy to describe the value of what a travel management company does when we've evolved from booking travel to everything else that we do. A management fee, I mean, I was described a management fee by one client that I went to see, that he disliked using travel management companies because he felt that just a management fee or a transaction fee was just a company creaming off of his travel spend. And that's how he described it to me. And that was a CEO of a leading tech company. And that's when I started to realize that actually we've got to change our language, because there's different companies now that are working with, and perhaps the old financial institutions will recognize what we do in the law firms, but these new companies that are coming into the industry now don't necessarily have a reference as to what a travel agent is, let alone what a management fee model or a transaction fee model might be. They don't have any historical reference to how travel used to be when we used to earn commissions and all that. They don't know any of that, and actually they don't really care. They just need to book travel. But the world has evolved to such a place now that TMCs are doing a lot more than just booking travel. And it's about our duty of care and the service which we can provide to those SMEs. It's about other assistance that we can do with data and analytics. And it really depends on the relationship as to whether a subscription fee model works and the services that you offer. If you are a transaction-based travel agency, you're going to struggle with a subscription fee model. But if you have diversified and you've got other services that you can offer, and you see the trip as a cost of trip and a cost to the company, then a subscription fee model can work.
So do you think, I mean, it hasn't come around. I thought when I first heard the phrase, maybe it had come around as a result of COVID. Clearly,
No.
it was being debated. I can see that through the media press cuttings.
Mm.
But say you're a transaction agent, as you were referring to just a second ago, and I will open this to the rest of our panel members, but we'll get your take first. Clearly, no transaction, no fee. So you're in the real rock and a hard place here. How easy is it to move across to being a subscription-based service? And if you is it going to be the new model for the new age, as the title is of this webinar?
Well, I think firstly, there's needed to be a change for a long time. I entered the industry about 20 years ago, and transaction fees were quite commonplace, but already a real barrier to travel, to sales for TMCs. People very quickly didn't really understand the value of a travel management company with regards to, if you can book travel yourself, why would you need to use an agent? And certainly, why would you pay more money for it? It didn't make sense. However, as I've said, as the world has evolved, these things have changed. And I think TMCs have unfortunately been quite reactive in this whole change. So from commissions being taken away and from us having to adapt our business models, we've never really kind of gone back to our corporates and stood up for ourselves and said, actually, we do quite a lot to look after your data, to look after your travelers, and to do this. And all of these things cost us quite a lot of money. And actually, we need to do this for the law because it's legal and it's important that we do all this. And this has really changed massively in the last sort of 5 to 7 years, especially, you know, with GDPR last year coming out. And you know, we have a responsibility to our clients and to their data and to the information that we hold. And whether people are traveling or not, that responsibility is still there. So the pandemic has definitely not caused this change. And I smiled when you said, is it easy to change people over? Because right now, No way, Steve. It's the hardest time ever. We were due to launch the subscription fee model in January. Let's not go as to what's happened between now and then, but trying to now ask a client to pay for something that they're not paying for at all, because it's a fee whether you're traveling or not, because you're paying for all the other things I've just talked about. Well, that's not a challenge. That's just not possible, and people won't engage. So we've had to be really, and Simon will be testament to this, flexible with our approach as to how we've done this. But do I believe it's the future? Yes, but I don't think it's suitable for all people. And I think where we'll land is a hybrid model so that people can have choice, depending on the type of business that you are, depending on the type of transactions you have. And we're certainly not going to be forcing any of our clients to move across. It's just to say there's another way of looking at this now, if it makes more sense to you.
Okay, let's go to the other end of the spectrum, to the buyer. Simon, if I can bring you in here, does what we've heard appeal to you in terms of a subscription model? And did you subscribe to Bex's view that some business corporate buyers see TMCs as creaming off, and that's why they've never quite liked certain aspects of the charging structure?
Yeah, I don't know whether I'd be quite so severe as that.
I was quoting. It wasn't Simon.
Yeah, but I mean, I think from my point of view, the subscription model offers, I think, a refreshing change. I mean, our business as a port agency is actually very similar to the travel management side in that we provide services for our customers who are ship owners and ship managers. So we see very clearly the difficult position that TMCs are in. And from my point of view, working with a subscription model does offer us some new opportunities to help manage global travel within our workforce. So we do struggle sometimes under the transaction fee to get buy-in from our travelers. So particularly when you look at low cost, for example, you might have a flight for €60, and then the TMC will want to add another, whatever it might be, a fee on top of it, which could significantly increase the total cost of the flight or the trip. So getting away from that, being able to remove that argument, is actually a really, really strong tool to help drive buy-in from all of our employees who are all over the world, and are very used to doing their own thing. And I think related to that as well is everybody, I think Bex mentioned it, everybody is used to booking their own flights these days. So they say, well, I can get that flight. Why should I pay a TMC to book the same flight, but then adding something else? Where's the value in that? And again, I think the subscription fee helps us get away from that argument because they don't see an additional charge. It's a one-off cost, which for us is better than a management fee. It's very transparent, but it also means we can ensure that we get buy-in from everybody, and also we can then focus on other aspects, such as trying to get them not just to book the flight, but also the hotel, everything in one system. And then we can also focus on things, particularly in our global business, such as traveler tracking. So we can also make sure that anyone who travels within Inchcape is traveling through the TMC, so we know where they are all of the time. And if they get into any difficulties, that the TMC can also assist. So I think that will help us solve a lot of our problems. It's early days, but we're fully supportive of the new model.
Okay, I mean, we may come back to the early days and get your experience of what early days mean, but you mix in the world of procurement, I'm imagining here. Do you think, are other people speaking about subscription models that are your peers? I mean, are you at the vanguard? Are you one of the first to do this as a big corporate?
Yeah, I mean, we've completed early this year our global travel tender, and we awarded the business to Blue Cube, and there were a lot of other large TMCs in the race and some smaller ones, and actually Blue Cube was the only one who came up with this model, so which I think is tantamount to testament to their forward thinking. But also, I mean, we've been working with Blue Cube for a number of years, and I think it says a lot about their willingness and to move forward, but also they see the market changing just as we do in the port agency side. I think technology, from my point, is also really important, and I think the way the subscription model will work is if you can really put the buyer in the driving seat, and that's one thing for me. I know our people like to make their own decisions. So if you have an online portal, they can go and they can see all the flights, all the hotels that are available. It doesn't necessarily need somebody to handle every single transaction, which I think was the traditional way of doing it. And the applications that are available now, I think, really give the transparency that I need as a buyer, but also I need as a manager of our TMC account.
Now, you interestingly said there that Blue Cube were the only TMC to come to you with this particular hybrid model. Did it catch you unawares, or were you vaguely aware that there could be alternatives to the full management fee and the pay-as-you-go kind of element?
Yeah, no, for us it was very new, and it's actually caused us to rethink our own models within the port agency sphere. So it's it's been very useful, and the breath of fresh air to me. And I've been looking for that lever to try and get buy-in from not individuals but also different business units within our group who have been quite vocal in their I would say mistrust, not necessarily the TMC but the model and the transaction fee model. And the other point I think that is really important to note is that subscription fee means that you pay once up front, so it also will increase the leverage I have with the business to not only include the flight but also add more transactions to that single booking. Whereas traditionally a lot of our travellers have booked a flight and then they've gone onto booking.com or somewhere else to book the hotel. So again, we lose the visibility and we lose the ability to track spend. And track where our people are. So again, this just removes that whole argument. That's one of the biggest selling points from my side.
Brilliant. Okay, so let's move into our other two speakers who are more on the technology side and in the middle of the chain that delivers this. Matt, first of all, if you could just tell us a little bit about Traxo, because some of our viewers might not be too familiar with what you do, and then how that relates to the subscription model itself.
Certainly. So as you said, Traxo is focused on helping companies turn their travel program into a strategic asset. The primary areas where we focus is really, we have an emphasis on off-channel bookings because whether you call it leakage or blind spot, it's where there's been the most unknown information in corporate travel, off-channel, off-piece, whatever you might call it. And so we focus on providing visibility to both the company, but what we're really excited about is providing this visibility to the partners of the company, including TMCs. And there's a really interesting, related to the subscription model here, there's a really interesting tie-in where so these are bookings where the TMC is not selling. This is, you're going to booking.com, you're going to BA.com, and buying directly from a supplier. But with the subscription model, there's a new opportunity here to strengthen the relationship with your TMC with a focus on your true total spend and leveraging the services that you get through that subscription relationship to a greater degree. So now it's not focused on just the bookings that your TMC is selling you, not with a transaction fee, but also all the bookings that are taking place outside of your TMC. And there are lots of reasons why travelers buy outside of the agency. They're going to the conference and they want to use the conference rate, or maybe there's compression, there's no supply available in San Francisco during these dates because of a big conference or something like that through your TMC, and so you got to go outside. And so all this represents bookings that the company is paying for. And if your TMC has great subscription-based services to help you analyze those bookings and negotiate better with suppliers, then Traxo is a partner to help deliver that data to your TMC relationship.
Okay, excellent. And I kind of fully now understand where Traxo fits in. Let's move over to David and Midoko and where that fits into this whole chain. I have to make the observation that the technology companies have the best backdrops for Zoom. You can just tell who the techie guys are. So David, and you probably take the biscuit actually, David, that is a fantastic backdrop, I have to say. So what is Midoko? Where does it fit into the subscription model?
Well, Midoko is a mid-office software, so we act as the normalizing engine, if you like, the place to receive all of the data, all of the bookings that are being made by a travel management company. I think for the subscription model, it's really important to be able to track and to consume and be able to accept all of the different ways that your customers may be booking, all the different channels, the different methods that you're putting forward into the market for the customers to actually book travel. They need to be collated. It's got to be, go through the full finance process. And ultimately, you need to be able to then rely on a software to be able to feed out into things like the risk feeds, to be able to produce reporting, and to allow the TMC to actually make good conclusions from the data, and to be able to feed back into their customers and have that intelligent conversation about what it is they're doing, about their behaviors. And really, Midoko sits at that central point. If you would consider us as the data warehouse, if you like, of this particular model, where Traxo would be an inbound channel for us, catching the stuff that doesn't go through the traditional channels for a TMC. And really, there's a lot of TMCs out there that would be considered to be traditionally architectured, very centric around the GDS, which is quite an old architecture, only deals with plain text, is quite cumbersome, and requires people or effort to be able to populate with things that don't live there by natively. So Midoko, the concept here is really to take channels from any area, connect it into this centralized database, and then to enable the TMC to be able to run their processes in the most efficient way. And really, when you're looking at this at any kind of scale, you really need to have an efficient process that sits out the back of all of these, as Bex quite rightly said, these diversified services, because the value proposition of a TMC has really changed. It's no longer just a booking agent. We have all these other things that we now do. And COVID has highlighted, I think, to a lot of people what travel management is and what we do. And it's heartbreaking to me to see an industry being torn apart in the way that it is, with the fall in bookings and just the revenue models that sit behind it. So, as that value proposition has changed, it's become something that, we are no longer just that create a ticket, send it to the airline, send one to the traveler, keep one in our accounts department, all of those time-consuming things. We are now the management agent. It's a very different proposition. And really, when Bex talks about value, and I think this is a really important piece, is that when you understand the value of what a travel management company does for their customers, really chopping up a management fee to a subscription model, as coarsely as you might put that, actually you really start to see the value of what you bring to the individual travelers. Simon makes a great point around compliance. If you don't get your travelers to buy into a program, then you can't see what they're doing. If you can't see what they're doing, then you don't know where they are. And corporate responsibility over the last 5 to 7 years, as Bex has mentioned, has really risen. So particularly in the face of COVID, not from a financial point of view, but from a risk point of view, you need to know where your people are. So if you're able to accept the channels, and okay, if they book it on bookings.com because for whatever reason that's what they did, well, then we feed it in through Traxo. Traxo comes to the centralized place. Or if the TMC's got a fantastic rate of this particular property and that's the corporate rate for that, for that particular corporate, then it comes in through the other channel, normalized by us. And that's where we sit in the middle. We sit as the, the hub of all of that information.
Okay, now I'm going to turn to some of the questions, because we're getting a lot of questions, as you would imagine, about a subject like this. And I'm going to ask this of all of you, but I'll start with you, David, as you're A on, but B, it seems quite a good slot to go. This has come from a couple of different people, so I'm just paraphrasing it really, but it says, is a subscription fee not a bigger challenge for cost allocation?
That's an excellent question. I think from a mid-office's point of view, what we're doing is we're giving the TMC the capability to look across how a customer is spending within the TMC and potentially through other channels. So from a technology point of view, it's not a challenge for us to present the information that allows the corporate to design and then run their model. So it's not a technical challenge as such. This is more of a, you could say it's a philosophical challenge around how you present the value and what you're charging back to your customer. In terms of tracking what comes in and the channels they're booked through and how we receive that, how we database it, how we're able to report that back to the TMC and potentially to a customer directly, depending on how they're connected. No, I don't think there's a challenge there.
Okay, and Matt, what's your take on that? Do you think there's a challenge there for cost allocation?
I wouldn't call it a challenge. I think that it requires just thinking differently about your program and maybe changing some of the KPIs that you monitor for, where you used to monitor for from a transaction standpoint, and now there are new metrics that you are looking to understand in your relationship with your TMC. So I wouldn't say it's particularly challenging, but I think it's a new type of, along with a new relationship, it's a new type of ways that you want to measure that business relationship and understand the value that you're getting out of kind of from a daily basis, from a quarterly basis, and from an annual basis, and working with that partner.
I guess the question, because I'm grouping it together, was, is it a bigger challenge than we currently have for allocating costs? Your take is that it's not particularly bigger than?
I wouldn't say, in my view. And I think actually kind of cleans up some questionable areas around, am I getting what I expect out of this relationship with the TMC partner? And so, because there's a lot, and Bex kind of alluded to this, there's a lot that TMCs are doing right now that probably they're not getting credit for, especially in times of new kind of privacy requirements of GDPR and just kind of back office functions of the business. And so this kind of puts a little clarity on some of those services that those TMCs are already providing to you, just to keep your employees' data private. So I think it kind of clears some things up.
Okay, so Bex, just help us out here. So what are the challenges, particularly on the back of that question? Is it a bigger challenge for cost allocation? But what are the other challenges that a TMC might face if it's going down the route of introducing subscription model?
Before I start, I'm just going to make an apology because Mark Smith's saying that I keep moving around and my laptop's on my knees, and I'm really sorry. Apparently, look, I'm on a ship, so I'm very sorry for that. But there's not an awful lot I can do about it right now, and I'm really sorry. Anyway, so moving forward, I'm going to say it's actually really challenging for a travel management company.
You say it's really challenging.
Yes.
Okay, right.
And that's what I think was important about making this distinction earlier. About the fact that this is not a response to the pandemic. It's taken us 2.5 years to look at this model and to understand how we can make this work. So this was even more gutting that it happened that I couldn't launch it properly this year. But beside that, we've had to look at, if you think about where our TMCs come from again, it's an evolution. So initially we booked flights for our clients, and it was flights. And then when those commissions got taken away, we evolved and we started adding extra things in so we could get commissions from other things. What we've become is a massive aggregator of content, whether it's online content or whether it's offline content, but with a huge amount of suppliers. And actually that in its own right, let alone subscription fees, presents us with a massive challenge. It presents us a massive challenge of how we present it, how GDS reliant we are, and whether that's still a center point in our system, in our ecosystems, or whether we're actually in some cases now making the move to think that GDS is actually just, and this is my opinion, it's just another content provider as opposed to the everything that it once was. But that in its own right is huge, because the infrastructure around that, when you've built your entire system, which many travel agencies have done on the back of the GDS. So there's huge challenges around this. The subscription fee, and I would agree with Matt here, if you can get it right, it actually clears some of these challenges and allows you as a TMC to understand exactly where you lose or make money and understand that really properly. And we've not always been that good, we're a little bit tech phobic because we're TMCs and we're more service orientated. And that's not to the tech guys, because they're amazing, and the Clicks of this world have been doing some great stuff but the more traditional TMC, we've even got a bit, back in the day when Premier Inn came in, we didn't even want to book that, we can be a bit negative. And actually, for me, the change has got to come that, look, this traveller, whether he's or she, I shouldn't ever do that, they are, all this stuff that they see online to book in their leisure, they want that in their business travel, and they've had it and they've been able to have it for 20 years. And this is why we have leakage. This is why all this stuff happens. So stop fighting against it and let's bring it in to our eco-structure and allow for that to happen. In doing that, that's complicated. The subscription fee is an additional complication. So it's just, unfortunately, it's about evolving to the next stage again. And I think travel agencies are really good at doing that. But I think that there's a huge amount of complications internally for us to be able to do that. And honestly, to be able to support the transaction fee, the subscription fee, we've produced a whole brand new set of analytics and the way we produce our data for our clients, because providing data in the traditional way that a travel agency does, which is historic, and it says you did this much business class and you did this much with BA and you did this much in hotels, it's not very interesting and it's not very helpful for the client. So in order for the subscription fee to work, we needed to give them more value. And so it sits alongside an analytics tool. So it's important to say, no, it's not easy. I'm not saying don't do it, because I do think it's the future and I think a change needs to happen. And I don't want to be the only one doing it. I really don't, which is why I'm talking about this, because my belief is that if we don't change and we don't adapt, we won't be here. And this pandemic has just made that worse.
Okay. And do you, I mean, Simon said that it was brand spanking new to him when it came through. Do you think it gives you a competitive advantage right now?
Yeah, it would do if anyone was traveling.
Yes, of course, yeah.
It gives us a competitive advantage to the fact that I can talk to people about it and I can have great conversations like this. It also gives me a risk that in the next 6 months, while people are not traveling, all my competitors can go and look at this and find out what they're doing. But that's not why we're doing it. Like I say, there's enough for everybody to go around. The way that the model hasn't worked for years, Simon very, very said exactly where the issue is, and it's a simple issue. The travellers themselves don't see the value. If you're lucky, you get someone as a travel manager or a procurement manager who does. If you're relying on the executives, they don't either. So you've got to have people within the company who understand that travel is more than just a transaction in order to make this work as well.
Okay, excellent. Now, just a word to our viewers. Lots of questions coming in on the comments section, which is probably why I'm not seeing them as quickly as I'm seeing the questions. Getting a stack load of questions, so we will start to ask your questions. So thank you very much. Keep them coming along. Just have a quick look at the poll, if we may. I don't know if we can get that up on the screen and see where we are. We started on 000, of course, naturally. Just seeing if it comes up. Looks like it's a close one between 52% saying, yep, they will consider it, and 45% still to be convinced, and 3% no way, Jose. So we'll have to have a look at where that goes towards the end. But thank you for taking part in the vote. So we're just marginally in favour of doing that. David, just give me a very quick view from your perspective of what you think would be the typical profile of a TMC that would benefit from going from, say, transaction or management fee to subscription fee.
I mean, I think Bex has talked a lot around the value proposition. Really, travel management companies that are able to articulate well and to actually execute a diversified value proposition towards their customers. And by that, I mean being able to add in things like reporting and intelligent reporting. And like I say, it's not just a graph for the sake of a graph. And I know we've got some people from the analytics businesses on here who do great jobs around this, but being able to present value to your customers that's meaningful. So being able to feed out into risk, having the reporting, being able to talk back about why you do what you do, that sort of behavioral analysis. TMCs that have been looking at those kinds of models are in a much better position to take this on board, because really, I've believed this for many years around the subscription model, that actually the value is in the management of the booking. The value is not in the booking itself, because it is not a complex thing to book a flight, not anymore. It was, years and years ago. I mean, I was a leisure travel agent 20 years ago, and even then it was, a bit clunky, but now it's easy. So, the process now is about us managing the travel end to end. This is about the before, this is about the middle, this is about the after, this is all of the components of the trip. And, TMCs that look at their customers holistically, that they say, okay, we've got a customer here who needs to understand or needs the environment to be able to book what they want to book. So we need to have the capability to receive that information and control it. And we then also need the ability to be able to look after those travelers during the life cycle of their trip. And that is from first inquiry all the way through to the reporting back into the corporate at the end of the cycle. TMCs that are starting to live that journey, and there are some really good ones out there who do this, but they throw people at it to do it. The TMCs that are starting to evolve their systems away, and I love the GDSs. You're amazing. You do some amazing things, but you are not the be all and the end all of the world when it comes to travel, because there are other ways, and there are, in my humble opinion, better ways to control and aggregate your information in an environment that allows you to stand systems and quality control and all of those processes that are hugely important to the corporates and the TMCs in a way that's efficient and automated and quick. And those are the things that you need to be considering when you're looking at how you structure the systems for your travel management company. I'm not suggesting that you tear the heart out and just completely start all over again, although working for a mid-office company, that might be great for me. I think what you need to do is to look at it as an evolutionary process, as Beck says. This is about getting your systems ready for, think of it this way. Airlines brought out NDC, 10 years ago now, 7 years ago? There's a split going on in terms of content. We've got some driving back into the GDS because they're terrified of what's happening with COVID. You've got some driving towards NDC really hard because they don't want to pay these distribution costs. But ultimately, that is fracturing the market in such a way that you need to have a system that's capable of accepting multi-source content from many different places and be able to centralize that and then be able to understand it and work process upon it without feeling like you've got to throw 300 people at it just to be able to to be able to facilitate the work for an SME corporate.
Okay. Matt, have you got any particular take on that, what the typical sort of profile of a TMC using this service should be from your perspective?
Yeah. So as you said, I'm kind of more of a technical guy and look around. So David and me and David are kind of fit that mold. But from a technical standpoint, yeah, I think there are some particular challenges for probably smaller TMCs who maybe not have the engineering and development skills available to implement it from a kind of a data flow standpoint. But partners and providers like Midoko are solving those challenges and making it easier as a whole. But I think Beck's brought up some really, really good points from a business standpoint and how you make that transition. And of course, I'd say that's kind of outside of my expertise, and I have to rely on what she says. So I'll leave it to Beck.
Okay, well, that's fair enough. So Simon, let's turn to you. And I've got another question from our viewers, quite a lot, but this one might work well for you. And it says, where does the subscription fee importance fit against something such as level of service that a TMC can provide you?
I think I don't say they're mutually exclusive, but I think the subscription fee is one thing, or the transaction fee for that matter, but it's also having an SLA in place. I don't think the two are necessarily that connected. I think the subscription fee is almost the financial part, and I think going back to what the discussion before, from my point of view and cost allocation, it's great because I can go out to my stakeholders and say, this is what your cost will be other than flights for the year, and that's really simple for them. But in terms of going back to the service side of things, and I think Beck's made a good point on this as well, that I think the changing role of a TMC will enable us as a user to have much better analytics, and the technology that's coming through will also help us ensure that the service is good, not just from the TMC, but also the end providers, the airlines, the hotels. And I think that's key to all this, but not necessarily linked directly to the subscription model.
Okay, so let me go back to Bex. Bex, if you could take up part of that question. So where do you think the subscription fee importance fits against the level of service that you're providing? And then I want to ask two more questions of you, because it is about the subscription model of TMC. So I've got to tell you, Bex, you're getting most of the questions here. So we might just have...
All right, Steve, I was expecting it. It's okay.
We'll have to dwell on you for a little bit just to get through some of these questions. So
I'm shaking. It's when my knees are moving.
Yes, it's not subject matter. So just taking up from Simon's point, where does that fit, the subscription model and the level of service?
Well, I guess I'm going to see it from a different side, although Simon and we've been working together, so he understands that service is exactly all it is for Blue Cube, and that's where we've kind of come as a company. So we were never actually sort of tech is something that we've developed, in the last 2 to 3 years because we've realised we've needed it, but actually historically it's always been about really high levels of service. But the issue with that is that when you're trying to make yourselves look different when you're talking to a client, we all say exactly the same thing. We all just say our service is really good. We've got great service, great customer service, brilliant. But what does that actually mean, you know, and how can you manage, how can you measure that? And we are now living in a world of data and measurements, and these things are possible. So I think it's difficult to justify a subscription fee model if you're not giving a good service. But define what a good service is, and that's when the questions start coming up. But I think it would be, you'd be hard pushed if you were going into a client and you were having complaints about that client all the time, and they weren't, as you were being complained about, and you had issues with that. I don't think a switch to a subscription fee model would necessarily go down too well. We've been able to have some quite interesting conversations with clients, certainly post this. And I know we're a smaller travel management company, so, you know, it's not, like I say, it's never going to work for everyone. It's a lot easier for us to be movable in this because it is easier for smaller companies to do that. But, you know, they understand now, because of the pandemic, that they still need us despite. So actually, from that point of view, it's an easy sell. It's just that they're not going to stop buying it yet. So it's not going to give us any cash flow for the short term, well, long term, while the pandemic continues. But it's easier to talk about now because they do appreciate some of the other stuff that we do. Does that help?
Yeah, no, I think that's clear enough. Now, Bex, you may or may not have be comfortable with this question or not, but the question is, and it come up a couple of times, can Blue Cube, and I think you may have touched on it, but can Blue Cube describe the mechanic of its subscription fee? Is it by user, active user, month, or yearly?
You're not going to like this answer. It's a combination of all of those because it depends on what the client wants, and that's the really
drives it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Our model has been from the very beginning, not just commercial model, our entire approach, because we're a smaller agents and because we're bespoke and because we can do that, is to lay it all out on the table, all of the possible things that are available, and then ask the client what's going to work better for them. So that we do that with everything, the way we invoice, the way we do reporting, and in fact the analytics tool has just been developed simply because we were listening to our clients and they were like, I kind of need to know this though, that doesn't really help me, this is what I need to do. So 10 years of listening has helped us kind of get to that point. But yeah.
Okay, another question here. This is from Paul Tilstone, which says,
Hi, Paul.
Bex, you were pretty forward thinking on NDC pre-COVID. How aligned do you still feel NDC is with future value propositions and a revised TMC business model?
I think it's well, let's first of all, where did the airlines go with this, Paul, and where do we, you know, where a lot of people have had to stop development, a lot of people have had to stop doing things. I made a statement about this quite a long time ago, which is not meant to sound negative towards NDC and the complications towards it, but for us it is another content strain, another type of content, and therefore if we're going to be selling travel to our corporates, we just have to have it, because if we don't have it, we're not offering them everything. Because despite what we're talking about here, and despite the fact that travel has changed and price might not be as important moving forward as it still was, it's still going to be pretty important and it's still going to be there. So it's difficult to have these conversations and justify GDS charges and things like that with NDC. So you just want to kind of take that away. And for a subscription fee model to work well, you want to ensure that your internal costs are streamlined as much as possible. And in some cases, if the idea of NDC eventually, then that might help. But at the moment, though, does that help, Paul? I hope so.
Well, it's
still there, but it's just more. It's more content, and it's on hold until, you know, we've made our decision as to which partners we would work with, and as and when it comes up.
So I'll just stick with this subject because we've got a lot of this. Do you see that so this is from Lucy Lavagina, who says, do you see that NDC and distribution of content moving away from GDS is going to support subscription models more or less?
I guess I believe it's the future, and I think it's about knowing your commercials. It's about knowing how much, as in your commercials, and what you know, what does your you've got to be very careful what I say, but with your arrangements with regards to the GDS and what you get, what does that actually mean to you? Because if your segment fees are supporting your business, then you're not really going to want to move away from the GDS at any point soon. If you found other ways of doing that, so you're working with other partners outside of the GDS and you've already moved down that road, then it's not so difficult. It really depends on that evolutionary journey and how you see the different systems in play.
Okay, so just for the sake of variety, I'm going to move back to some of our other panel.
Boring. Me.
Just give you a bit of light read. Simon, if I could just draw you in to the session, how does this subscription model impact the travel policy of a corporate like yourself, or does it indeed impact the travel policy?
It's made it much more straightforward, actually. I've always been reluctant to say you have to use the travel policy, you have to book with a TMC, because sometimes it's been hard to justify that additional cost, particularly, as I said at the start, when it comes to low cost. So we've completely rewritten our travel policy, because we can now say to people, look, the technology that's available, the content that's coming through that technology is pretty much the same as you'll see if you're buying either direct with the airline or through Google or through booking.com, that kind of thing. So it means we can make sure the travel policy is, I suppose, much more user-friendly, because we don't have to worry about compliance as much. We will say to people, any time you book travel, it has to be through the TMC. And I'm expecting far fewer complaints than I used to have through the old transaction model, which, believe me, were quite a few. And I must say, not from Blue Q, but this was a previous company. But it will hopefully clear things up, and I'm expecting it to. Certainly, the feedback I've had so far is it's very well accepted.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that, Simon. Now, listen, we're into our last 5 minutes here. You won't believe how quick an hour's gone, but we're into our last 5 minutes of the webinar. So could I ask each one of you, we'll go in sequence. So we'll start with you, Bex, if we may, and we'll finish with you, Simon, and we'll take David and Matt in the middle. If each of you were to advise a TMC, or indeed a client, that they should seriously consider the subscription model in their relationship with their client, what would you highlight as the most important consideration for them to bear in mind, and the most important benefit that you would see them getting? So if I can start with you, Bex, what would be the most important consideration you'd ask them to bear in mind, and the best benefit that you'd see for moving to a subscription model?
I think there's got to be some willing in the company itself, within the corporate, to move it forward. And that would be my biggest consideration, because we're not just talking about travel bookings. We're talking about bringing HR information into this. We're talking about the need of... Oh.
Are you there?
Yeah, sorry. I am here. Everything okay?
Yeah, we can still see you.
Okay, I know, but can you hear me? It was weird.
We can see the alarmed look on your face as well.
It's like it was talking to me. Sorry, really, all this talk about technology, and I'm totally terrible with it. But there we go. Right, sorry. So I think it's, for me, and I come from someone who was in corporate sales, right? So I sold for HRS and I sold for travel management companies. And I just used to find it really hard to get engagement at the right place within an organization, because the majority of people in the company just see it as a transaction and means to an end when they need to do something. And honestly, if that's the level of engagement that you can give as a corporate to this, then you're going to struggle. And your TMC is going to struggle, because the value adds that we're giving aren't moving forward. So you have to have people, and I always say this when bringing a new client on, it's lovely to obviously have the relationship in procurement or with a travel manager, wherever that sits. In SMEs, can I just say, there is often not a travel manager, and often there's not even a procurement team. So this could be coming in later. But you want to try and bring someone in from HR, you want to bring stakeholders in from finance, potentially some travelers as well, not just the execs, but the others. And you want to create this user group and this idea, and it takes time to get there. And that's the thing you need to be prepared for. And you need to see travel is not just a transaction. There's a cost to your business if your employees travel. And that's the switch you've got to have. And if you don't have that, you're going to be fighting against your executives to try and actually get them to hear what you're saying.
Okay,
what was the other question?
No, it was what were the considerations and what were the down bits? And I think
there you go. I think that answers both.
So David, if you'd like to give us your view, if you were advising a TMC to go down this route, what would you think of the benefits, and what do they need to keep front of mind as considerations?
Well, being a tech person, you know, my mind immediately leans into system capability and the ability of you to be able to run the model efficiently. You know, Bex made a great point around the streamlining of internal cost. I think if you have a system that is capable of taking information in a efficient way, and you're able to look at your data sets in a way that allows you to analyze and look at your customers and potentially identify those that may well benefit from this, then I think you're in good shape. There is always a degree of commercial risk. I think so long as you understand your commercial model internally, and this really does lean back into the whole spectrum of change that's going across the industry pre-COVID. I mean, if you ignore the last 6-7 months and you look at the way that the industry is diverse or sort of disaggregating its content, you have, you know, a fall in GDS revenue, you've got the rising cost of NDC, you've got all of these different commercial pressures. That means that, you know, it's not necessarily a clear picture for someone to understand their business. If you've got to a place where you really feel you've got a proper handle on your own curves, your own adoption percentages and ratios for these other channels that are going to give you commercial risk, and you have the capability to, you know, and the will to move into a system that's capable of receiving content from multiple sources, then, you know, those would be the things that were in my mind. You know, can we transact this in an efficient manner? And if we can, are we then able to report on the value and to affect the value back to our customers in a way that's meaningful and relevant?
Okay. And what about you, Matt, in terms of benefits and considerations for anyone thinking about doing this?
So I would take the perspective of the client, and particularly the traveler's perspective, and how a subscription-based model might change your relationship with your travelers and the travel policy itself. And so just be willing to make changes to your travel policy, understand your travelers more as stakeholders to your travel management program. And then as part of that, ensuring that you have access to your booking data from the places where they book. And that's a kind of a critical component. So when you do transition to a subscription model, you are able to provide your TMC partner as much information about your travel program as you can. So those additional services like the reporting and analytics services that Bex talks about will benefit from as much information as possible about what's really happening for your travelers.
Okay. And Simon, bringing it full circle, and Bex referred to the need for engagement, particularly at a senior level. What would you advise of TMCs thinking about going into this model and particularly selling it into their clients?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to take it from a client's point of view, if that's okay, because I think, if from my point of view, it has been it's been an interesting but also a slight leap of faith for us as well to go down this route. And I would say, if I'm recommending other clients to go, and I suppose it's the same for TMCs as well, but I think there are very few TMCs that are ready to make this leap of faith towards the subscription model. So I think it's essential for the TMC to consider, are they ready to do it, but also for the client to choose the right partner. And I think David mentioned there's a certain element of commercial risk towards the TMC, and I'm well aware of that. You know, the fees are less than the transactions. I think that's, being honest, that's one of the driving factors for me, which then goes toward the benefits of being able to get more engagement from our workforce and also for the management. But because the straight revenue from fees for the TMC will reduce, it's really important that they can operate efficiently, which goes back to the technology piece and all those kind of things. But Bex made a very important point as well. The workforce and the support still has to be there. So even though our travelers will mostly book online, there needs to be an offline support. If something goes wrong, or they get stuck in the middle of nowhere and need flight rebooking, whatever it might be, that service level still has to be there. So it's certainly a risk for for the TMCs, but likewise for us, we have to make sure that we partner with the right company so so we don't get let down.
Okay, so thank you for that. And that's a really good insight to give us. I mean, essentially what I've taken from this today is that the TMC now has another string to its bow, and it can be mutually exclusively good compared to, say, the transaction model and the fee model. So more tactical support and strategic support for the TMC and for the client. So that's what I've kind of taken away from today. Can we just bring up the poll and see whether we got a final result on what we think? Remember, it's 52 to 48. So yeah, we've moved a little bit more, just a shadow really. But essentially, it looks like just a smidgen of the majority of viewers watching and tuning in today would go for the subscription model. So let's see how that develops in maybe a year's time. So we're almost up. First of all, my thanks to all our panel members today. So my thanks to Bex from Blue Cube Travel. My thanks to Matt Griffin from Traxo. My thanks to David Chappell from Midoko. And of course to Simon Potter from Inchcape Shipping Services for giving up their time. I hope you got some insight out of today's session. My apologies, we couldn't cover all the questions, but we did try and get through as much as we could. And my thanks also to you for taking part in the poll. So hopefully we'll bring more of these Advantage webinars in the BT world to you over the next couple of months, but maybe some food for thought in terms of whether you put your business towards a subscription model. So from me, Steve Dunn, and from the rest of the panel, thank you for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you again sometime in the post-COVID world. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.